In this video, I wanted to talk about gain staging in FL Studio. Gain staging seems to be a buzzword these days, and so I just wanted to discuss what it is and why you might want to be using it in your production. So let's hop right in and get to it. All right, so first off, gain staging is just the process of adjusting the audio levels at each stage of a project to minimize distortion and noise. So let me go ahead and demonstrate this in regards to FL Studio. Anytime you have something going on within your channel rack, you really have a few different options as far as how to adjust the volume of a specific sound. So for example, here on the kick drum, I have an individual volume knob right here specifically for the kick that I can manipulate within the channel rack. Or what I could do is I could click on the actual kick drum and it's gonna pull up the settings page. And what you can do right here is use this volume knob right here. And what you'll notice is that it's actually correlated with the volume knob within the channel rack. So whenever I move this, it's actually moving the knob within the channel rack as well. Now, another way to control volume is if you have any audio here in the playlist, with the newer updated version of FL Studio, you can adjust what's called the clip gain. So if I drag my kick drum into the playlist itself, and then I zoom in, you can see right here, this little dot right here, you can bring this gain up or down utilizing this clip gain control. So there are a multitude of ways of controlling your levels before even sending anything to the mixer. And this is very important to understand because everything that I've shown so far, as far as the volume or the level goes, it's occurring before the mixer. Now, once you send your sounds to an individual mixer track, we can just continue to use the kick drum in this example. So you see right here, I had the kick drum sent to mixer track number 1. So if we open up the mixer, you can see right here, I've even labeled everything. The kick is going to mixer track number 1. So here on the mixer track number 1, the way this works is the audio comes into the mixer track, and instead of just going directly to this volume fader right here, it instead goes over to the plugin effects rack and goes through all of the plugin slots if you have any plugins loaded over here, and then it comes over here to the volume fader. So the next spot to control our level after the channel rack and the playlist would be here on the plugins. A lot of plugins will have both input and output gain controls. Usually at the very least, they'll have an output gain knob. So for example, on this Pultec style EQ that I have loaded on the kick, you'll see in the bottom right of the plugin, there is an output gain knob. So you can use this to either decrease the gain or increase the gain. So the audio right now is coming into the mixer. It's going through the Pultec style EQ plugin, and then it's coming over here to the volume fader. So the volume fader is really your final level of control as far as your individual tracks go. A lot of people will only use the volume faders to control their level. And to me, that is not the best practice or habit to get into. You really want to get into the habit of utilizing all of your available level controls for each stage of your production. And I'll go ahead and show you a couple of reasons why this is more efficient. So for the first example, let's go ahead and turn off the Pultec style EQ plugin for now. And what I want to do is just take a look at where this kick drum is hitting at when it's coming into the mixer. You can see that we don't have any volume adjustments here in the channel rack. So basically this is just the volume of the kick sample itself with no adjustments. All right, so the kick drum is hitting pretty close to 0 dB coming into the mixer. Now, a lot of these samples that we get from drum kits are already gonna be peaking pretty loud. So if we're coming into the mixer pretty hot and close to 0 dB and we don't make any adjustments to the kick beforehand, you can see we're already hitting around like -1 dB. That's pretty loud, and there's not a lot of headroom for your mix, to be honest. Now let's say we're mixing the kick and we wanna turn on the EQ plugin and we want to boost some of the low end right here. And then we also just want to add some mid-range for some more attack on the kick. Keep in mind, I'm not saying to do this all the time. This is just an example, but not something that, is uncommon to people who are mixing drums. So now let's go ahead and press play and take a listen to where the kick drum is hitting at. Okay, so now we're in the red. We're going above 0 dB where we could start to introduce some digital clipping if we were to just export it like this. And digital clipping just doesn't sound good. This would be different from the clipping that you would get from like analog hardware or even from clipping plugins like Fruity Soft Clipper, Gold Clip, or Standard Clip. So coming into the mixer already at a high level doesn't really give you headroom to boost anything. But that's okay. This brings me to my first point. If you are gonna be boosting things with plugins, which is like 98% of us, then you need to become familiar with the output gain knob. Make sure to utilize this output gain control to bring your level back down. So if we were peaking at -1 and then we, boosted the low end and boosted the mid range, and now our kick was peaking above 0 dB, we need to use this to bring the volume back down. And this will do two things for you. One, it allows you to level match, so you're not tricking your ears into thinking that you're making something sound better just because you made it louder. Like obviously, boosting the low end is gonna sound cool because you made stuff louder, but if you actually return that sound back to its original level with the low end now boosted, how does it actually sound? Do you truly like the tone of that sound compared to the original now that the low end is boosted? Utilizing the output gain knob within your plugins allows you to level match things, or at the very least allows you to bring the level down so you're not feeding a hot signal into your very next plugin. Because believe it or not, these plugins do react differently to signals coming in at different levels. A lot of plugins, according to the plugin manuals, have optimal levels that they sound best at. So in my opinion, it is best to kind of come into the plugin rack with a healthy gain level, meaning you have some headroom away from 0 dB so you're not sending everything into the red. Now I know there are no rules to mixing, and some people like the way, going into the red sounds, but keep in mind, this is a gain staging tutorial. So I'm just trying to make you aware of how and why you would want to control your gain throughout the production process. So now that we have the output gain knob turned down a little bit, let's go ahead and just press play and then take a listen to what we are working with now. Okay, so our kick drum is now back underneath 0 dB. In today's world, going above 0 dB, it's not a huge deal because you do have so much headroom within the digital space, but it's just something that you want to be conscious of. You want to be aware of where your signal is and how it's reacting to the adjustments that you're making within your mix. So for me personally, I like to set my initial levels for each sound here within the channel rack or within the playlist. The volume fader for me is just somewhere where I can make some final adjustments to the sound as it leaves the plugin rack. I don't like to use the volume fader for setting initial levels because it comes after the plugins and not before. So if you use the volume fader for setting initial levels, that's gonna cause some issues. So let's go ahead and take off the plugin. And what we're gonna do now is I'm just gonna utilize the volume fader here on the kick drum to basically set my initial level to where the kick is gonna be hitting at -9 dB. So I basically just wanna demonstrate, setting your initial levels with this volume fader and what issues this is going to cause for us in the future. So even though I have the volume fader set to where my kick is hitting around -9 dB, my kick drum is still coming into the mixer pretty hot, right? Because we already saw that our initial kick drum sample is hitting at around 0 dB. So we're coming into the mixer pretty hot, and we're just utilizing the volume fader right now to turn it down at the very end of the chain. So if you were to set your initial levels like this with the volume fader, you might trick yourself into thinking that you have a lot more headroom than you really do. So if you were to come over here and load that Pultec style EQ and then boost the low end like you did before, now basically you went above 0 dB, but then you're turning it down with the volume fader, but you might not even know this is going on because the meter is telling you that you're at -9 dB. And ultimately what this tells you is that your plugins don't really see the volume adjustment that you make with the fader because that comes after the plugins. Now, another example that could present issues is if, you load like a limiter or a compressor on your individual track, and you basically lower the threshold thinking that you're gonna have to get it down to around -9 dB, right? Because that's where you set your initial level, but it's actually gonna start engaging, as soon as you bring that threshold down, like at around -1 dB, because that is where the kick drum in this example is actually hitting at when it comes into the mixer. So let's go ahead and take a listen. Okay, so as you can see, I'm already getting gain reduction on the kick drum, and my threshold is only at -3.7. So you see how the level that you set the kick drum at with the volume fader and where it's hitting at on the meter, it's not gonna correlate with what's going on within the plugin chain as far as the level goes. The volume fader and the level meter are all occurring after the plugins. So it just gets weird when adding like compression or anything dynamic processing wise, because the threshold at which the plugin starts engaging is gonna be a different level level than what you think you're actually hitting at. The plugins all see the level at which the signal is coming into the mixer, not the level at which it's leaving the mixer. So just to recap, the kick drum, by nature is already hitting at -1 dB because that's the level at which this kick drum sample came out of the drum kit. I'm not making any level adjustments with the volume knob right here. So it's coming into the mixer and then hitting this limiter plugin. Even though we use the volume fader to turn it down to be hitting at around -9 dB, the limiter plugin is only seeing the kick drum hitting at its original level because, once again, the plugins come before the volume fader. Which again, this might not bother you, but gain staging is just about understanding the flow of your signal path and how you can adjust the level of your signal at different points. So I hope this makes sense. The audio signal first starts here in the channel rack or within the playlist, wherever you have your audio coming from, and you can control the level here, and then it's gonna come to the mixer where it's first gonna go through all of the plugins over here and then return over here to the volume fader. All right, so that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the content. Please consider subscribing to the YouTube channel if you haven't done so already. Leave me a comment, let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next video.